I ask a question? One of the things that I'm finding in general, and this is sort of the double-edged sword, is that technology advances our society in so many ways, and yet technology is a prohibitor in some cases from the building of relationships. So has there been any research done on that? You know, what kind of role is technology playing in the ability to do this? I mean, obviously there's LinkedIn and all of that, but the personal connection, relationship, understanding that happens from a face-to-face interaction is quite different.
It is. I'm not sure about the research. Dating services, you know, Match.com. People don't stay on the Match.com forever. Eventually, they have to meet face-to-face. Why? Because we have to do that. And so, if I were to guess about the effect of technology, is it's okay at a certain level. You know, introductory, share some information, blah, blah, blah. But in order to establish a real relationship, you have to go across the table. It's like conducting a conversation through a keyboard.
Sure. And I would say that's some of the people I've seen in leadership roles, that's the piece that is present. That seems so obvious, but I mean, it's just called, you know, leadership management by walking around. You get out of your office, and instead of sending everybody on your team an email every 5 minutes to say do this, do this, do this, the personal interaction of sitting down and actually reaffirming it is so powerful, but I think that's often forgotten. But the best leaders are the ones who get out consistently and are doing that.
The research I've seen on things like email and electronic data says it's good for facts, and it's awful for everything else. Skip had a point that he put up that 20% of the communication is important and 80% of it tends to be void. Well, if you go through and look, over 70% of communication is nonverbal, and you can't get any of that in electronics.
That's the keyhole problem. Communicating through keyhole. But the CEO of a company last week or the week before shut all the email off for a week in the company. Nobody emailed, and he said it changed everything.
Mary Ann's hyperventilating.
Are you the email lady or something?
I use it quite a bit.
Do you?
And I think pretty much everybody does.
Well, he said that there was a high-level management person in his company, a woman, who had a secretary right outside her door, and she would email this person stuff all day long. And when she couldn't do it, she walked out of town. And he said that changed everything.
And she didn't go back to using the email with that person anymore. I remember the story.
So interesting stuff.
Can I just go back to something?
Absolutely.
A point you made about top management said, why aren't women telling us? I have to agree with that. I think women need to be more really aggressive with it. Just say what you want. Don't expect someone to come, you know, and nurture you all the time. You have to let somebody know this is what you want, this is what your expectations are. And I'm just...
Find ways to toot your horn. Find ways to toot your own horn.
Right.
And it's really the hardest part about that is accepting the risks of doing that.
Exactly.
And knowing that somebody's not going to like you. Or you,
Yeah.
if you can take that job.
But we don't want to be not liked.
That's right.
It's absolutely true, but you just have to say, you know what, that's okay. This is what I need and want, and I know I can make a difference. It's okay they don't like me. It's okay.
And you know what? One of the people I have looked to at an early age as a leader in my life, a female leader, one of the things she said to me, similar to that, which resonated with me, is, I am not concerned about people liking me. I'm concerned about them respecting me. And that's something that I think people just assume that's one and the same. But that's so much like that. You have to, that like is the personal piece that we have to somehow remove. And, you know, obviously, we all prefer to be liked, of course. We're human. But to know that you're respected for your decisions and your ideas, that's a whole other thing.
Many of, because of the, when you see a slide like this, the perception is that there's gender bias and it's driven by gender. Actually, when you break it down by industry, you can see industries, for example, public accounting. There's a Big Four CPA, two of the Big Four run by women. They have women-friendly initiatives, and yet they report the same problems. They report the problems of, nobody comes to see me, or not enough people, or they don't step up often enough. So yes, there are some gender issues, I'm not denying that, but many of the same problems occur, whether it is or isn't.
I wonder if there's a relationship here between self-like and willingness not to be liked by others. Because I've talked to a number of women who say, well, if I felt better about myself, I would blah, blah, blah. And I wonder if there's a relationship here. And the person who is the leader, who is capable of leading, so all the things that were listed over here on the other sheet about being vulnerable and all that other stuff, is related somehow, I think, to this. So here's the thing. This is something that when I do leadership development, that I do a lot of work with, and that's this business of self-efficacy. Being aware of who you are, liking who you are, feeling effective. That's a critical thing. It's an individual thing. It's something that each person does for him or herself, with some support from others. But it's got to come, I think, fundamentally from inside. So if you're going to be a leader, this, I think, is an important component.
The other thing that comes out very, very strongly, and it goes back to your comment about passion, women are much more likely to need to feel passion, understand why I'm doing this, why it makes a difference. They've got to buy into it. A lot of women leaders got to be women leaders almost accidentally because they found something they felt very, very strongly about, and that brought the leadership skills out of it. A big problem with leadership is it's a lot of work. You deal with a lot of negative attitudes, a lot of you deal with an awful lot. The assumption is Jeff Immelt at GE gave a speech. You have to be deep before you can be broad. You have to be very, very good and very, very productive, and then make other people very, very good and very productive. And it takes a huge amount of energy. The only way you can do that is to tap into something that you feel passionate about. And this theory about having it all in perfect balance doesn't really exist, but you get better at it the more you do it. But you have to find out, what is it? There's a phrase I was using with Christine a little earlier today. We used to always talk about the glass ceiling. I can't get through because there's a glass ceiling. These people that have done a lot of the research have come up with a new phrase on that called the glass cliff. You got to prove yourself, whether you're male or woman. You got to step up, step out, take a chance. A lot of women have to take more chances than men, but you still have to take a chance. You're not going to do that unless you feel passionate about it or feel engaged. Sometimes that's because the person you're working for found out how to tap into it. A lot of times you have to tap into it yourself. How do you do that?
A lot of self-analysis. Know that.
You very rarely, well, with some exceptions, you get there by accident, but most of the time you have to commit.
And we get back to that business about being conscious of what you're doing. If you have a goal, figure out what it takes to get there, and then do it. And if you decide not to do it, or you decide not to do anything, then there's a responsibility on it as well. Yeah.
A lot of people think women, this whole likeness issue and respect issue means that when you say people fear being not liked, people are assuming that women are all these negative things and aggressive, and then people have this, see these women that may abuse their power, and people equate men as these aggressive, nasty, mean little people, and I don't think they are. They aren't all that at the top, and a lot of women associate that this whole negative side to power and leadership, influence, and I don't care if you kind of like me attitude, because they think this, you have to take this sort of hard role. And I don't think men are overwhelmingly taking this hard role. in that. I don't know why women feel like they have to jump on that bandwagon and not just be who they are, because a lot of women tend to be a little bit more nurturing on some things than men may be. But I think men are very personal too. We like personal relationships in a different way oftentimes than men have them. But I think men are very personal in their relationships and who they know and how they connect with people. And then in terms of the disengaged, the actively disengaged folks, a lot of them have issues with self-efficacy. I've worked with two people that no matter what, it came to me very quickly, there was nothing about work, there was nothing about the other people, it was all about them. That they really had issues with it. They could not very well translate very well. Sometimes you hit the light bulb moment from a year and they burn their light out so fast that it wasn't even funny. But I kept trying because when you see potential in some people, when you see that they can do some things effectively, you got to try to keep after them so they don't keep burning out their own lights and ruining all of their relationships with people. But a lot of people, I call those actively disengaged sabotagers, because a lot of times they want to take away the vision. They don't want things to be communicated. They're always trying to cut something off because they have their own personal issues that they just cannot deal with very well.
It's a power issue.
And translate. Yes.
It's
They feel like they
attempt, I
lack
think, by
personal
some
power.
of them to exert their own power because they feel powerless. So one of the ways you can approach a person like that is to give them more authority. Say, listen, I'm going to give you more authority, more responsibility here. I want to see you handle it. See? Small things, not the company.
Yeah, not
The company's
trust.
So, is this helping you? I mean, is this making sense in terms of becoming better leaders? Okay. If we're going down the right path, then I'm okay.
When we transition to our third session,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to talk a lot about, to use a Marine phrase, don't expect what you don't inspect.
Right.
If you want to have a leadership plan, you've got to have, if you want to be a leader, you've got to have a plan, you've got to grow into it. There's a lady who's the head of the organizational development program at the Harvard Business School, Linda Hill, who I one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. When Nelson Mandela became the head of the Union of South Africa, she was invited over. She was one of his advisors. And she was stunned to discover that for 8 years they had been grooming people for those positions. Some of them they picked out of little soccer leagues in college, put them in charge of a city something, and then in charge of a state something, and then they put them in the federal government something. She said, gee, I don't know why that didn't make sense to me. I teach that at school. It just never occurred to me that that's what they would do. A lot of times if you want to be a leader, you have to think incrementally. What can I do today? How does that tie into something tomorrow? Because you've got to put a stream of those things together, that it all involves stepping up. And it's if you know the definition of insanity, if you keep doing something again and again and expecting a different result, you're probably crazy. But you should see improvement. How are you going to grow your leadership? The classic is the best leaders that almost everybody can think of is either their mother or somebody they know in school teacher they had. What happened? Why didn't that translate into something else? And how can you think about that and translate that into your own life? So.
You're the math person, right?
No, I'm the biology person, that's the math person.
Who's the math person? Really?
I'm
You're
a
the math
mathish person.
Fractals?
Fractals?
You know fractals?
Fractals.
Yes. So that, fractal means that each little piece of something replicates the big something, only smaller. So if you put if you want to draw a P, a fractal looks like this. Each little piece of the whole looks like the whole, except that it's smaller. That's a P. Okay? This is a fractal. So the thing David's talking about is this: is that you need to have. We talked about vision. That's the overarching thing. But each little piece of that has to be consistent and advance it in some particular way. So the incrementalism that David's talking about is really this kind of a thing. And then we get back to the trust business, because as soon as you go that, then the trust that you're trying to build with your consistently moving forward diminishes. Is this making any sense, these drawings? Okay, what else do you, David, you want to set up anything else for the next time, or?
Well, I think the easiest is to ask you, what would you like me to, I've got part of the presentation already done, but we've listened to an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. What are the sorts of things you'd like me to talk about? Do you want me to go into more detail on what the research says about getting things done? Are there things that are challenges that you faced getting something done?
One of the things I think that would be really cool is all the folks who are going to be in that session or from this session, if there's something that you want to focus on or get an answer from that maybe we don't cover here, or that relates directly to your personal or professional objectives, vision, maybe we could pool those ideas together and get those to you also.
Yeah.
Of course, people can share them here, but it takes a while sometimes to marinate on. Oh yeah, and it's on the evaluation form.
Yeah, please
So
do.
if we could do that. The other thing too, I think that's important, and this is just from my perception, is not every organization has opportunities for all the time for advancement. So if we're relating leadership to advancement, it's not always a cookie cutter clear process. So when you're talking about leadership opportunities, when maybe there isn't a natural hierarchical opportunity, how do you create those? And how do people find where those fit? Because I think that is very relevant to our type of organization. I don't know if people agree or not.
That's absolutely right. It's not here for everybody.
But there are ways to lead without taking on a formal leadership role.
Well, and I think that's what I'm saying is that's not always focused on, and it would be a really nice, kind of a nice way to close out that session with helping us identify what those look like.
To your point, I mentioned the book by Margaret Wheatley, Leadership of New Science. One of the things that she makes a very strong case for is that leadership comes from anyone in the organization. So, as a leader, whether it's a formal or informal leadership role, something that you need to do is be aware of who the other leaders are. And that was mentioned, as part of finding the people who know what they're doing and can work with others.
The McKinsey report talks about 3 or 4 things that they think would help for women. One of them is more women in STEM, science, technology, education, and math. That's where the growth in our economy is.
It's just repeated in the State of the Union message.
Swim in the faster water, you're likely to get there sooner. Learn more about entrepreneurship. It's gender unbiased and does allow you to have more control over your time in odd, funny ways. And then work in companies. I thought this was blinding obvious, but for the work in companies that are looking for women as leaders, understand leadership development. Understand companies that value your leadership skills. There's nothing more frustrating than working for a father in a family-owned business who wants his son to be number 2 and be the oldest daughter. So.
And those companies will advertise themselves.
I decided after having worked about 20 years that people would have made a lot of different decisions if they knew the results of what the race were before they started the race. It's much easier to work for a profitable growing company than it is an unprofitable slowing company. It's much easier to get a job that pays well than a job that pays poorly. But people don't know what the job's paying. They don't know what the companies are growing. So but maybe we can talk about some of those. I would love to fold in things that you're interested in. If there's difference. If you want more visuals, we can do that. If you want more communications, we can do that. I think it's good to have the panel next month, because that goes back to the point where when you see somebody, you go, oh, I get it. I need to be more like that. I went to a college. Your comments earlier today, young lady, reminded me. I went to one of the top 10 colleges in the United States as an undergraduate. I was totally intimidated. Our average class size was 5. It was impossible to be quiet. I got to my senior year, and I was an econ major. I was the only one in my family, or my mother's family, or any other family that had ever gone to college. And I said, okay, what do I do with a degree in economics? This was the late 60s. And they said, go to graduate school. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. Right? I borrowed all this money. I worked 2 jobs. You tell me to go to college? I didn't even like going to school. And my wife, who was a French lit major from the 16th century, had the same experience. So I had worked for 2 or 3 years, married my wife, who was younger, and went off to Harvard to go to graduate school. And it was such a wonderful experience. Every day, there was 15 or 20 executives in. Every class I was in, we used case method, and it was typically the CEO of the case was hiding in the back of the room. So when you said something stupid, he'd say, no, that really wasn't the way it was. And I found it very easy to go, oh, I like those people. I don't like those people. Is there any chance I could do something like that? And, oh, by the way, I think they had 120 job interviews, different companies. And so when I got out of school, I made 3.5 times what I made as an undergraduate, my first job out, and I thought, this makes sense. And so what I've tried to do in my teaching is, to the degree that I can, do experiential activities where you're physically active, and community outreach into the community, so people can go, oh, it's easier to network if I've met the guy or lady. It's easier to go, I'm not working there for that person. Not a chance in the world. And I think that to the degree that you can take it from the theoretical to the practical, a lot of this stuff really isn't rocket science. There are some very, very big, talking to your wife occasionally after 42 years is always an interesting subject. Some of these conversations have been going on for 44 years since we first met. I'm not optimistic that those are going to change, but she keeps trying to change me.
It doesn't work.
God bless her.
There's one other thing that I want to cover before we wrap up, and that's the 5th item on the agenda. Did you get an agenda? I got an agenda. And it is this: what changes occur as you become a leader? And these have to do with relationships, and responsibilities, and the uncertainties that come with change. And how do you face those things? Now, I'm not sure actually what even question to ask, but changes do occur. Maybe it gets back to the business about being conscious about what it is you want to do and making the decisions that will get you there. But maybe the most important thing to know is that significant changes in your life will happen if you decide to become a leader, a whole person, irrespective of your job title.
The most frequent things I've heard is people get so sick and tired of saying, communicate, communicate, communicate. I've said this 500 times. Of course, if you got 5,000 people, you may have to say it 5,000 or more times. But the communication is fatiguing. The stress of trying to make the numbers and work with the weasels and the naysayers of the world is frustrating. But you have to keep tapping into that passion, the reason for being a leader. And the relationships are different. They are complex.
Yes, Kelly.
Do you suppose that if you are wanting to be on the path of leadership, that you, given the fact that things will change, that you have to accept change before you can ever be a leader?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you don't accept that there's change, there's no point in being. If you don't believe that people are mutable, go run a drum press sometimes. Because people will change, and things will change. They're going to happen whether you were there or not. So why not direct them in a path that makes sense to them?
But I find that people are much better able to cope with change and stress if they feel like they can affect it. If they're in, they don't even have to control it. If they're just making it, if they understand that it's coming up and they're influencing it,
Give it a nudge.
that seems to help a lot.
When I was working straight out of college, I had a boss, a general manager of the hotel that, gosh, back when I was in school, there was that lovely leadership pyramid, you know, and they turned it upside down. And he was a master at the upside down pyramid, and that he held it all up for us, but he really let us lead charge.
Right.
Those that were on the front line were the top of the pyramid, basically, but it was upside down, and he just stood there and held it up, and I think that was probably one of the best examples, because he was willing to let things change as it funneled down. What do you think? How does it go on a day-to-day basis? All right, then let me work on making the process different. And I think I really appreciated that approach, and it was one of the moments in my life where I said, that's what I want to be.
If you haven't studied servant leadership, that fits very much the mold of how women want to work. So the person who does the upside down triangle or does servant leadership consistently asks questions like, why? What can you tell me that I don't already know? And how can I support you in this work? Those are the kinds of questions that they typically ask. And those are very nice questions. And the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter who you are in the organization. When somebody who's running the place asks you those questions, you just feel better. You get more engaged.
There's
So
a
there's a lot to be said.
there's a fancy word called regenerativity when you get into your 50s and some people earlier. You get a lot out of the people you developed. Yeah, women get this with their children. You get a lot out of seeing your children succeed. Well, that same thing happens with leaders. And there's a wonderful virtuous cycle that you will discover good leaders, good mentors, and a word we'll talk about next time, good sponsors, which is even more important than a mentor, are people that you stay in touch with for a long time. You know, the old pay it forward really does make a big difference. So.
Okay. We've bent your ear and talked with you for a couple of hours. So thank you very much for your participation.
If there's anything that you have a lot of passion about studying, if I can get people to do that next time, that would be.
Okay.
Thoughts, I was real simple, just like Ross and Laura.